welcome. I've had a lot of kind of conversations about today and what was going on. I really, my personality kind of is going to be a lot of this presentation, hopefully, because some of the information might not be new to you, but I was hoping that I was able to kind of pull it all together and make sense of it. So perhaps after I'm done, questions might be a lot more appropriate, and then we'll go from there. So I have been working at Native Child for about 8.5 years, but I've been working in Indigenous early years for 24 years. So it's a long time, and it's a commitment, and I've always known that was my place in life, and that was my journey, and I'm still on it. I still feel very valuable. I still feel very that I'm actually here working alongside the community, making steps to something better, to be able to have the Indigenous people have their own right to self-determination and quality early childhood care. All right, so I took one of the recommendations from the Truth Reconciliation and put it up here because I thought this could be, it's pretty general focus, but in the end, it's kind of what we're here for. So I think they're calling for all levels of government, as well as in Aboriginal government and service providers, to make sure there's appropriate, culturally appropriate early childhood programs. All right, Patricia thankfully said our mission statement in there, so I'm just going to skip by. But it's important to know that our mission statement was a journey itself. Some elders and starters had the thought about what we can do as a community. They went in 3 days talking about what our mission would be, and came up with this. And I'm very proud to say that it's something that is a consistent focus for myself and my team. This is one of the little guys in our class. So this is also one of the little guys in our class. I love photography, so I took some of these photos, and it really was something that brought a lot of the families in. So even if this one story is something you take away, it is. So I have photos of all the children in my office, and I changed the photos. And so everyone knows this. So and they're 8x10s, and they're very nice. And so I invite families to come in and see them. So the kids want to come and see them, and the families want to come and see them. But then when you're on the wall, they also want to show other people the photo. So people are coming into my office with this positive, attitude, saying here it is, and it's not there to complain. It's not there to have to pay for fees. It's not there to have some other issue. So even that one simple thing is something that I found very valuable, and it also continues the conversation about who is there and how we're connected, and people will come in and they recognize that, hey, I know that person, and they're from the community, and they feel very welcome. So even that is something. So I came here this morning, and I got 3 pieces of advice. And so I wanted to share this with you because I find it quite humorous, because people know who I am and whatnot. So my partner, his name is Prince. He was really happy. He ironed me a shirt. I didn't wear it because it was whatever. And I'm like, oh no, I'm just going to throw this on. And this was the kind that you don't have to iron. So he says, you're going to do well, babe. Just don't swear. And I'm like, I'll do my best. And it was kind of odd because Nicola, my intern, said the same thing, don't swear. Because I am a colorful person. I do have a personality just like anyone else. And I'm just who I am. This is who I am. I can't ever be anyone else. My second piece of advice was also from Elaine. And I said, I'll try not to be so colorful. I said, I know why I'm here and whatever, and she said, oh no, we want you to be yourself. We want you to be colorful. I'm like, okay, great, I will be. And the third piece of advice was from my coworker, and she texted me, she said, good luck today, you're gonna do amazing. And then she said, just throw the word pedagogy around and everyone will think you know what you're talking about. And I said, damn it, I didn't use the word in my presentation. So I'll take at least one of those advice at some point. All right. The other thing was I noted I felt really proud the last presentation about the racialization, because when he talked about the two beefy white guys and the black male, and then the two black male and the white male, I immediately thought that looks like both fun times to me. So so I feel like, hey, I guess I don't really have that bias. So I'm quite proud, very proud. And I thought I would say that. We're cleaning the slate. We're back to here because we're going to talk about some serious stuff, right? But anyways, so some of the things that I'm sure many of you have heard when working with Indigenous people is residential schools. And it's a very serious topic. It's a very important topic. And I'm happy to hear it a lot. But everybody has a different story. And again, being a storyteller myself, I feel like it's important to listen to every story because you're going to get something different from them all. So I'll share some information about it and then I'll give you a little story. Right. So Indian residential school system was based on clearly stated goals of assimilating Indians, deemed to be the most effective way to civilize the Indians. 1879 seems like such a ridiculous thought now, but I believe that we still have to be aware that there's people who still believe this. There's still people who have that in the back of their head, that racialized, just like what we talked about this morning. And I think that without knowing that this is why the residential school systems were there and how it might have affected someone, I think sometimes people might soften what it meant because we've heard it so many times. Some people might think that, yes, it is, but it's 2017. There had to have been some progress. In theory, yeah, there should have been some progress. But really, when I talk about all the things that are currently happening to Indigenous families, you're going to see that it really is still a issue today. My mother went to residential schools, and again, I have another story about that. And you'll see how it might not necessarily be something that is 1879. It's 2017. So, and the other one that I put was, I want to get rid of the Indian problem. I do not think, as a matter of fact, that the country ought to continuously protect a class of people who are able to stand alone. Our objective is to continue until there is not a single Indian in Canada that has not been absorbed into the body politic, and that there is no Indian question or no Indian department. So if you're familiar with Facebook and blogs and people, you'll see that these comments are actually repeated today in people's messages. People who believe that, hey, why isn't the Native person, why isn't the Indian, why isn't the Aboriginal person figuring it out? We're all the same. We all have the same issues. Well, that's not true at all. And I feel like this was, again, 1920. However, I am seeing these statements today, last night. So there was a paper, Residential Schools, It Matters. So these are the things that I really liked out of this. So again, going forward with residential schools, it matters because it continues to affect First Nations, Inuit, Métis people. And again, I'll speak to that in a bit. It matters because it happened in our country. I think the first speaker said the Indigenous problem issues and concerns and problems and with early child education is a Canadian issue. It's not an Aboriginal issue. It's not an Indigenous issue. It's an issue that all of us own. And I am a Canadian, but I'm also an Indigenous person. So I believe that I'm here to speak because I know it's important, but I'm also here to listen because I know that's important. And it matters because we share this land. We're responsible for our actions today. So working with Indigenous families, there's a lot of things to consider. And again, I think a lot of people know some of these facts or stats and things, but I just wanted to kind of give a capture of that there's a lot of issues that all community members feel, all people in Toronto feel. I said, but if you had to check off how many of these issues Indigenous families are faced with, you're going to have a lot more check marks. And that's really difficult for people to comprehend when they're trying to fit people in a box, because not everyone's going to have a box. Every single family we meet is going to have a different story. Every single child you meet is going to need something different. And that's a big task to say that we're going to be able to figure that out. It's a big task and a commitment to say, oh, we're early childhood educators and this is our role and we'll do it. How do you do that when you don't really understand all of the things that are going on? So again, it's getting to know people. It's getting to know your families, who they are. And I'm just keep referring back, and I'll be talking about that too. So. Poverty, the median income of Aboriginal people is almost $20,000 less, so it's just 30% less of the average Canadian. Is $19,000. I'm like, how does someone live on that? Like, I don't even remember. I'm 44 years old. I don't even remember making that. I think my first job, luckily, I was the receptionist at the band office, and I was making $15 an hour. Like, I don't know how someone makes money on that. So when I'm working with families, I'm so conscious of how money is so important, how money could become the number one priority in every single decision they make, whether it's decisions we think that should be so easy, like, oh, I don't know why they didn't make it to this subsidy meeting, they need childcare. But there could be 7 different things that happened at 9 o'clock to 9:30 that morning that stopped them from coming to that meeting. And it's not for us to decide what people's priorities are. It's for us to understand how difficult sometimes it is to have priorities that we think they should be. Housing, nearly 1 in 4 First Nations adults live in crowded homes. 23% of Aboriginal people live in houses in need of major repair. I grew up on the reservation, and I remember my family was considered well off on the reservation. My father worked. We had everything we needed, but we were there to support the entire family. So again, we're talking about what family is and how we define that. But my aunt, as winter came, heating always became an issue, how people could heat their homes. And it wasn't uncommon for my aunt and uncle to barricade rooms with blankets and to only heat a small area of the house. And so bedrooms became irrelevant because they would all sleep in the same room. So that's when I was growing up. Last year, I was talking to my cousin, and the same thing is still happening. Again, where's the progress? What's changing? My sister, issues with gas and not having enough money to pay for it, being isolated sometimes. There's being able to coordinate all that things to make sure everything runs smoothly. Community members here having no hydro for a short period of time because they don't have time to pay for it, because they have to prioritize what they're paying. They need a roof over the head. Sometimes that becomes the number one priority. Sometimes that can't even be the number one priority when you make $18,000 a year. Intergenerational trauma is really. Oh, I forgot to mention that sometimes I get very emotional talking about this, and I remember someone telling me that if you cry, you're not done your healing journey. And my response to them was, I cry because I'm on my healing journey, and I cry because I feel the sorrow of my community. So I do my best not to get emotional, but I always get emotional. And I always am who I am. So forgive me if it takes away from some of the kind of, what we're used to. We're used to people being so professional and whatever that means. And even myself today about how I'm dressed, it's not really who I am. I did this for you. You're welcome. You're welcome. I would prefer to be in a tank top and a shorts, and I still would be the same person with the same message and the same commitment to the community, but that's a different story. So anyways, intergenerational trauma, the overrepresentation of children in child welfare. We are a child welfare agency. We are doing things differently. We do understand that it's a journey, and we are on that journey, and we are committed to that journey. So having the of Indigenous children in the child welfare system is a tragedy. It's just ridiculous that us as Canadians are accepting this. Like, why is this okay? What are we doing wrong? We pat ourselves in the back for all the things we do right, but we're not paying attention to the Indigenous children. So if anything comes out of this, just pay attention to that and work with the service providers like ourselves. Health and well-being of Aboriginal families. Indigenous families are sick. Their children are not well. It has a lot to do with the housing. It has a lot to do with the food that they eat, what they could afford. It has a lot to do with being poor. And so that would mean they're going to miss more childcare. They have larger families, so when their siblings are sick, they're not going to bring their other children. When you have 4 children, get them on the subway to go to a childcare program. So one child being sick, they're all going to miss. So they're going to have a lot more absent days than others. They're also going to have sick family members. They live in larger families, so their family members are going to be sick, so those kids aren't going to get to childcare. So we have to figure out a way to make it accessible to families so that when they miss childcare and their programming, we're not penalizing them, or we're not taking it as that this is not something serious, this is not something they're committed to. And even just being conscious of that and being able to support families about ways that you can move around that. We have, our drop-off time is 1 o'clock because they need to be in the program minimum 5 hours. So we know that it's not best for the program, but sometimes it's best for the family. So yes, it sometimes disrupts sleep time. Yes, sometimes we have to save food and whatnot, but we need to make sure that people, when they do make it to our programs, that they're able to be welcomed, friendly, children have something to eat, and they're also being able to access the programming. Right? So cultural oppression is another. I have a lot of things on here, so I'm kind of picking and choosing what I'm going to talk about, because again, when I thought about what I'm going to talk about, I'm very much a very live person in the moment. I believe that whatever I say and share is what was meant to be said and shared. And it sounds like a cop-out so that I don't have to prepare, but it isn't. It's really what I believe, and I think that each moment that you share with someone is a teachable moment, and you learn from someone. So even as I'm sitting here thinking about, what's going to be so vital and important to say, what is it? Because I could talk for days and days on everything, because this is my passion, this is my expertise. I could say I'm an expert on Indigenous childcare and early years because I am, and not maybe in the ways that other people might be academically. And I'm kind of proud of that. I'm like, this is I live this and I breathe this and I show up every day with the same enthusiasm. So whatever you hear is great. If I'm talking about the same thing next time, you might hear something very different, but hopefully it all kind of makes sense. So. The key, I think, is knowing your families. So I'm going to talk to a few stats about Canada and some stats in Canada. So the Aboriginal population is the fastest growing population. So they're growing. They're the youngest population, or they have a young population. I think it's, it says right here, 25 to 35 versus 25. So there's twice as many children under the age of 15 years. And even Toronto has its own specific stats I'll talk about. There's 600 First Nation communities in Canada, and 1.2 million Aboriginal people. And we were just chatting earlier, and there's a stat that's 1.4. So again, depending on who you ask and when you ask them. Estimated 70,000 people in the GTA. Again, some research says government will tell you there's about 40,000. Aboriginal people will tell you about 80,000. Other people will tell you there's about 70,000, and that's me, one of those people. 70,000 in GTA. So in Ontario, there's 134 communities. In Ontario, I think I've been to about 48. I was like checking out one day. I love knowing who my community is. I've done a lot of traveling. There's this thing called the Powwow Trail, where Aboriginal people in the summer spend time going to different powwows and different communities. So I love being with my community. So in the past, that's some of the focus that I have been on. There's approximately 35% of the population is on reserve. So when we think of Indigenous people, 65% of them are off reserve, which means they're in areas like Toronto or cities, not necessarily on reservations. 8% of the population is 0 to 4 in Ontario, and about 9% is 5 to 6. So 17% of the Indigenous population is under 9. So that's a lot of the children are off reserve and young. On average, Aboriginal children have a higher infant mortality rates, lower immunization rates, poorer nutritional rates, higher rates of obesity and other chronic diseases. So again, talking about how their health is not as the same. Even that one statement, lower immunization rates, means they can't get into childcare. They don't have immunization available. They can't track where they got it last. We have so many children that come and the parents like, I don't remember where I got immunization. Oh, it was back home. And then that process of just trying to get communicated to their clinic and their family doctor, which a lot of people don't have, and getting it back to us is a process, and it needs support, and they can't do it themselves, and it becomes a barrier, and it becomes a no, I can't go to childcare. So being aware of that and finding out how to support families is going to be also very key. Again, one thing that you learned, there you go. That's something that we should pay attention to. So Indigenous families in Toronto, 60% of First Nation communities had to give up important things in order to meet shelter-related costs. To afford to live here, they can't eat. They can't do social recreation that we think, that physical literacy is so vital. Can't afford to do it. Choosing what to eat, what not to eat. We all know you go to No Frills, it's a lot cheaper to buy the garbage. Ooh, I almost swore. Garbage food as opposed to healthy food. We all know that. So what do we need? And then these children are coming in not eating healthy foods. It affects their behavior. It affects how they interact with other children. Their parents are affected by this. They come in not necessarily understanding all of our policies and all of our systems and all the things we expect. So I just really hope that people, when they come away from today, realize that other families have these issues. Indigenous families have these issues, and then the other things that we're talking about. 22% of First Nations populations sometimes or often did not have enough food to eat. We have a food help program, which essentially is a food bank. We're not allowed to call it that, so we call it food help program. And we do our best to make sure that families have something to eat. When I first came in, there was a policy that they only could come once a month. And I'm like, well, if they need it once a week, they're coming once a week. So I think it's just acknowledging that sometimes people make rules and policies because they want to. Listen to the community, what do they need? They need it every week, then they should have it every week. There should be no shame in saying, oh, financial literacy, we taught you this, why aren't you doing that? A lot easier to say than do. I would challenge everyone to try to live off $18,000 this month, next month, and see. You'll be at my food help. 40% of participants reported that a child protection agency was involved in their own personal care growing up as a child. So this came from the tribe report. So 40%, it's like 2 in 5, 4 in 10, something like that, of people have been involved in child welfare. The child welfare system is difficult. It's difficult to navigate, difficult to be in. There's a lot of things that come from that, where children who are displaced from foster home to foster home, families who are torn apart because of this. But it's also necessary to protect children. So it's this kind of balance of what should we do and how are we going to do it. But knowing that the adults that come into your program have already had child welfare involvement, it's going to make it very apprehensive to share information with you about their child. When something happens, when there's an accident, whatever, they're going to feel quite the microscope of, oh, this is what I'm used to. This is what I'm used to. People treating me, making assumptions about me. So again, thinking about that when you're working with children and families. 55% of respondents with children reported that their children had not participated in any programs for Aboriginal children. So over half the people aren't doing anything outside outside of the home, outside of school, or outside of the things that they're used to. So when we think of children in hockey and gymnastics and piano and all these wonderful things, over half of the Aboriginal children are not even having access to that. So, what I hope to get from that was to know your Indigenous family, so to know people you're working with. And I'll give you an example of that because I'm going to talk about myself briefly, and that's what kind of I like to do, so, you know. This also could be a whole seminar, but today we'll make it quick. So I have 12 quick photos, and I'll tell you something about each photo. And because of the time restraints, I'll try to be really quick. So this is my family. My brother, my other brother, my sister Wanda, my mom, my dad. But one person in there is not my sister. One person there is my cousin Georgina. And at that time, and oh, by the way, every story I get, I ask people their permission to tell their story because people usually know that I'm going to, share it in a good way. So my cousin Georgina, who's currently actually a nurse now, she was in care. And my family, my dad was like, oh no, she's not going in care. She's coming with me. So we took her, and she's my aunt's daughter, and she came with us. So we're going to the photo. This is at the church. My mom's Roman Catholic. Good for her. This is at the church, and it was photo op time. And so we're like, let's get in the photo. And the priest who knew our family was like, oh, Georgina, step aside. And we're like, oh no, Georgina's our family. Come in. So sent Georgina and our family. But it's just a story to say there's actually, my brothers are missing from here. My brothers were incarcerated in Stony Mountain Penitentiary, 2 of them. And so they're missing from this photo. Again, that's another story about the misrepresentation of Aboriginal people in the criminal court system, in the criminal justice system. And so to me, this is important because we don't decide who family is. Families decide who family is. So whether at this time it was my cousin Georgina, who was with our family for about a year, or their friends, their neighbors, their cousins, you're going to find working with Aboriginal people that the people who are important in their life aren't always going to be what we consider that nuclear family, or the family that is blood related, the family that is. So knowing who they are is going to be very important. Knowing who's important in their lives and who's vital in their lives and who's going to be interacting with them is important, and not assuming that it needs to be somebody else. So that's one takeaway. This is my mom and my sister, and they're planting. So our whole life we hunted and gathered berries, food, and whatever. So that's something else about me you didn't know until now, and I'm proud of that because I don't hunt and gather. I don't whatever, but I know the value of it. I know what it did to our family. I know how it brought us together. I knew how it helped supplement income, and I also knew how it helped keep me healthy as a young child because of the food that I was meant to eat, as opposed to the McDonald's that I want to eat later today. My brother, this is my cousin. I put him up there to honor him. Him and my brother passed away about a month and a half ago. So this is a video of him catching a moose. So this was only 2 years ago. So hunting is still vital in some communities, but why I shared it was because of the way that Indigenous people look at family. That moose doesn't go to his family. That moose doesn't go to my brother who was with him's family. It goes to all of the family, and it depends on how big your family is. So my aunt, who has nothing to do with that moose hunt, got the biggest proportion. She has the biggest family. And that's a kind of in a nutshell how Indigenous community works. We're about justice and not necessarily fairness. It's not about equality. It's about what is needed in that moment and taking only what you can get. If you only need a portion of that, why would you take more? So I think that's also something that's very vital in our community to think about. This is my brother. Again, he loves to fish. He lived in Winnipeg, and he drove freezers of fish and moose meat all the way to Toronto so I could have. And that's what family is to me. And that's why it was so important, because he knows how important it is for me to have traditional foods that we eat. I have a best friend who's a vegan, and we have a lot of debate about things, but we've found a common ground of where we respect. We have 2 totally different value systems, 2 totally different ways of looking at things. I understand why she's vegan. I respect that she's vegan. I am not. And that's okay. And actually, I used to say that all the time in my speeches to the students. I would say, and that's okay. I'll try not to say that today, but it sounds a little silly. So my aunt, traditional dancer at a powwow, very proud of that. My nephew dropped out of school, grade 8, was as far as he went, has a child. He could tear apart a skidoo and put it back together in front of your eyes. He's learned how to hunt fish. It's still relevant in his life. And he works at what he knows. And when he was talking to me about some of my nieces and nephews are wonderful news, they're all going to college and university, same with my children. He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Uncle, I didn't graduate from school. I know how important you think it is." I said, "Oh no, what I think is important is that you're happy, that you're living a positive life and being a good person. I don't care if you went to school. It doesn't matter to me." I said, "Are you happy? Are you living your life positively? Great. That's success." It's not, I don't think success is, oh geez, I only have 10 minutes? My goodness. All right, I'm gonna go back. All right, well, there's me graduating from high school, college. First one in my family to graduate from college is my son. These are my children. Happy to say, daughter graduating from nursing, other daughter starting college this year, my son in college this year for policing. We valued our own traditions and our own values, cultural. So some things that came out of here, we did a survey to the community. So again, we didn't tell the community what they need, we asked them what they need. And they said they want more cultural experiences, they want elder participation, traditional teachings, and continued programming on site. And on site meaning in their own community. So something I've learned when working with Indigenous people is that they want to work with their people in their own community. So the monies that are coming out for early years and Indigenous early years is amazing because it's something that the community has been saying they need. And I put the stats about the youth forum because they said very similar things. Cultural knowledge, take a stand, help the parents and children, strengthen the community, and have a variety of options. And this is a quote from one of the youth. I didn't put his name, I just put his initial. "Community is our people, everyone who wants the best for Aboriginals." So at our Scarborough Child and Family Life Center, we are open to all of the community, anyone who identifies as Indigenous or anyone who feels like they're part of our community. And that has really changed the kind of way that we interact with people, partners. You come into our youth department, this is an Indigenous program, and there's a variety of people there. There's a variety of youth, different backgrounds, different ages, different racial groups, different religions, and they're all able to work together on different tasks. And there's a lot of things that we're proud of that have came out of the youth department. And if you ever want to know about them, give me a call. So we have developed our holistic approach of how to service community. Essentially, we need to service the community as a family, everyone in their family from 0 to senior, and childcare and early years is just a part of that. My philosophy is that we don't have to figure out what we're going to do with a child. The child has to figure out what they're going to do with us. And I think that when I give advice to parents, it's about making the child fit into your life. They're the visitor, they're the ones who are getting there last, so you have to make it work. And I think that simple kind of philosophy is something that will go a long way when you think of a family and who they are. So when they come in, make sure that we're able to service all of them. So working with Indigenous families, identifying and defining families, so I talked about that. Being able to service the whole family, so being able to serve the whole family helps use the strengths of the family. So when you're aware of all the family and you're aware of all the needs, then you're able to use the strengths back into your own programming, accessing and understanding childcare and early years programs. So if you're able to help navigate the system, it's going to be something that's going to be so valuable to the community. Even things like acquiring and maintaining subsidy is going to be very valuable. Once they get childcare, it's not like you're on your own, because sometimes keeping childcare and the process is going to be something that's going to be very troubling. Aboriginal people are visual spatial learners and prefer a holistic framework or understanding that is reflective and collaborative. So not everyone learns the same way. Be aware that very hands-on people, which as early child educators should be something that comes naturally. Being outdoors, having your feet on the ground is something that's going to make you listen in a totally different way. And I think, again, one of the reasons why I shared some about myself is until you knew that about me, you really are listening to me in a different way. And the more you know about me, the more you're going to listen. You're going to hear some things that I say in maybe a more meaningful way. Maybe in a way you're like, oh, who is this guy or whatever, the more you know about me. I don't know. But in the end, it's about what you know about the families is how it's going to help you meet their needs. Without Aboriginal education, Aboriginal students are in a perpetual state of identity, chaos, and dependency. It affects their ability to succeed. I think we all know the education system has a lot of barriers for families. They don't necessarily go with the cultural values of Aboriginal people. Working with in the education system isn't my strength, but I do know that when we think of the way that people learn and go outside the box about what we're doing in the classroom, I myself, I've been to many workshops with people and things. I can't sit there. I can't listen to that. So I have to figure out, what I'm going to do to make sure that I go through that. And a lot of Indigenous families, our youth are the same way. Contemporizing the traditional roles for urban Indigenous people. So sorry that I'm running out of time, but I'll try to keep a lot of key points. So in this way, I think traditionally, Aboriginal fathers were hunters and gatherers. Mothers were looking after the family. I'm just basically saying that's generally what the roles were. So what can an Indigenous male do now? Thinking about changing the way we look at things. For example, going to school is like setting the traps for the trap line. Going to class is, sending out the cast of the fish. And graduating is like the moose, and we got that for the family. Simple thing like that is going to understand that, hey, yeah, we do have a role and we do have a place in the urban community, and it's not the same, but we could still be the same people. And again, defining success, I think, remembering that not everyone wants to have the white picket fence with the house and the car and the kids. I remember when I was 12, I was abused as a child, sexually abused, and I remember that I said, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that these horrible things don't happen to any child. So I had a commitment at age 12, but I said I need to be happy myself. So my goal was to be happy. I remember when I was 25 years old, I said, I reached the goal, I'm happy. And so I became the person I needed to be, who I wanted to be. And knowing that success is something that we have to ask people, what do you want? What do you need? What do you want in life? And because it's different than us, it's not enough. We have to be able to say, I appreciate that that's your goal. I appreciate that this is what success means to you. All right. So let me edit in my head while I go on. Elders are very key. A lot of people don't have access to elders, but elders are there to help reflect all the stories, all the teachings that they've had to the youth, to the community. It's something that's very vital. What we have is because of someone stood up for us. What our seventh generation will have is a consequence of our actions today. Really, really powerful, and again, in a few minutes, I'll be talking about how the 7 generations is a philosophy that I stand by. Storytelling is something that's used in the early childhood, and it's something that could be easily modeled by all stories have a different meaning depending on how you listen to it, depending on who's telling it, depending on how they say it. It's something that's really is really valuable because it teaches moral code. It teaches children how to reason. It teaches children how to listen, how to respect. We're talking in a circle. It teaches children that we all could have a turn. It's in a circle. There's no There's no leader. There's no one who's more important. We're all on the same level. This last part, so I have one more story, and it's a good one, so I'm going to skim through. Special gifts and inclusions. Families with special gifts are people we consider with children with special needs and parents or guardians with special needs. So when I think of families, I always think of the special needs of the whole family and not just the child. Families could find it very stressful to navigate through multiple systems, including childcare and education, like I've said. Families have to meet numerous professionals and educators. It's draining, it's intimidating, cumbersome, not fun, and some people aren't even nice persons. Families may have a previous involvement in residential schools and experience extreme abuse and the slaughter of culture and language. I know that when people use the word loss of culture and language, it just upsets me. It wasn't a loss. It wasn't a we did this and you won and I lost. It was a slaughter of culture and language. I have went to school and learned Ojibwe from grade 1 to 12. Both of my parents speak Ojibwe. I cannot speak Ojibwe because we weren't allowed to. My parents didn't see the value of talking to me and teaching me. I had no one to speak to. Indigenous culture values may not be compatible with mainstream educational system values. I think everyone knows that. Children and adults are special gifts in our values as teachers. So here's my story. So this is my two brothers, both my heroes, my oldest and my youngest brother. My youngest brother was born with cerebral palsy and some other health issues. And when I was young, it's all I knew, right? My brother, I remember he was in the hospital and someone told my parents that he has to be in the hospital and he can't be home. So we went to visit my brother at the hospital, right? And then one day, it wasn't me, but I remember talking about it in the car, saying, why does he have to be in the hospital? Why can't he be at home? Why can't we do what he does there? I think it was my brother who mentioned that. And my parents were like, yeah, why not? And so my dad and we were about 2 hours away. So my brother was 2 hours away from us. And my dad got in the car, and we're like, we're going to get my brother. And it was like really exciting. Like I was like, oh yeah, we're going to get my brother. I was like proud of my dad, just he was like so pissed off. He was so upset. And I almost did it. He was so upset, and he's like, I'm going to get my brother. So we go driving, and we go to the hospital, and of course he'd be very dramatic. He was like packing up, didn't even tell them what they're doing. And he picked up my brother, and he's like, let's go. And we went home, and now my brother lives with us. My brother's been with us and my mom since. So as we're growing up, my mom used to call my brother the professor. And I always wonder why he had a special name. I had a special name, but it wasn't anything flattering. So my brother's a professor. And I remember I was about 10 or 11. I'm like, why is he the professor? What is it? And whatever. This doesn't make sense to me, right? Because I was the one who did well in school. I skipped 2 grades, and I was the little browner who was like, I want to do more work. And she said, your brother teaches us how to think of someone else's needs first. Your brother teaches us how to be patient. Your brother teaches us that not everyone has the same opportunities. And that's what special needs are to me. My brother is a teacher. That's special needs. So I put this quote because I hoped we'd have a diverse audience. Sort of diverse. I think it could still be more diverse. Let's see more males, more brown faces maybe, more Indigenous people. Is there anyone Indigenous here? I'll raise my hand. Trouble no one about their religion. Respect others in your view and demand they respect yours. I think that's where we're at right now. We're saying, we could work together, but you need to respect that Indigenous people are different, that we have different beliefs, the word religion, I don't know that that's what we mean, but I'm going to use it here because it's something people can relate to. So, all right. Becoming involved in Indigenous relationship with a child and family is a courageous act, and I challenge you to do that. It is vital to recognize Indigenous early years as unique programs which require Indigenous leadership, which I feel has been recognized, but now we have a big task ahead of us. And this is part of the healing journey of Aboriginal people and Canada. So yeah. So thank you. Miigwech. I'm a good boy. All right. And I have one last slide. I actually find it very humorous. Right. Yeah. So references. So I went to early childhood education, and once I was done, I'm like, oh, this is what I'm doing. I don't need to do anything else. So I've been kind of, pushing back as far as like, oh, you should go to do social work. You should do this. You should go back to school. You should get your master's, and whatnot. And so when I was doing these presentations, my coworker's like, oh, we have to do references and whatever. And I'm like, references? I don't do references. I'm like, what? And because traditionally, Aboriginal people have used this strong oral history to pass down teachings and stories. So a lot of the things I've learned, I believe that's how I've learned it. Traditionally, Aboriginal people do not believe that a person owns information. So I don't believe the things that I've said, that I own that. It's not an ownership. That being said, I still put the references. All right.